Is it the absence of solutions from government that is driving solutions from the private sector? Or is it the other way around? Let's go with Brian. Brian, is it the absence of solution from government that leads to solutions from the private sector that leads coworkers to try and organize, or is it the other way around?
From the conversations I've had with my peers here, I don't think there's necessarily an expectation for the government to come with solutions for freelancers. I think an element of freelancing, that the hint is kind of in the name, is the freedom. And I think when you look for freedom or flexibility, I think that comes itself with also some downsides, and that downside is there's a bit more, people look at it as a bit more of a risk. So for example, a colleague of mine was looking to get a mortgage. For him to provide the evidence to the bank that he could actually fulfill his obligations with the mortgage was difficult, right? Like he didn't go with them saying he was a freelancer, because from the perception of the name would not be good. Now what he did do, and I think this is where the solutions will come from, and I think there's been lots of examples of it today, is from the ground up, or from the freelancers up, where you can come up with smart solutions to de-risk yourself. Or so for example, I know my colleague, he formed a partnership with other freelancers, and what they did was they have contracts with companies where they provide services, and when they demonstrated this contract and this certainty of income to the banks, that fulfilled the bank's requirements in terms of certainty around income. So I think the solution that I see coming, I think it will very much be from the freelancers. I don't think structurally the governments have to provide solutions, and I don't think realistically in the short term that's going to come. I think the solution is going to come from that bottom level up.
I think if I can jump in.
Yeah.
So what we're discussing is, the issue that I see is that the question is not asked, how can we actually make the independent worker status evolve so that it comes with access to social benefits that are privately provided, but also state provided. So I think this is something that we should look at, because in Europe, we keep talking about how we want to be champions of innovation, how do we want to drive the technological change. But if I would put it in a picture, like I see this future of work is a train that is fast and is speeding up, but what does this train keep, what does it keep on track? It's basically the tracks that are built from social policy, from access to education, from access to benefits. I think this is something that is often discussed like isolated from each other. So you talk about AI, you talk about technological opportunities which are there, but people might not be able to actually exploit them because they face a social safety net that actually discourages them from making use of new opportunities. So how can we actually work on that issue so that we basically build on a social safety net for the 21st century? That's basically what policymakers have to do. The private sector is doing a lot, I think, and that should be complementary, but it should not, I think, bear the big burden here. So, I mean, I have very good examples. I have two friends who actually work with SMART in Belgium. So one is a Russian teacher, the other is an actor. So these are very good solutions. But I think all in all, what they would like is actually that the state is also getting active. And it's not only about like looking for social policy, but also being innovative in that space. Europe as a leader needs to be an innovative player, not only on the technological side, but also on the social policy side.
I think on that point, what I noticed by listening to the discussions around is that I think everybody agrees that we need new support schemes for the new workforce. I think everybody agrees that something should be done, but where people disagree is how it should be done. So if you look at a discussion on portability of benefits in US, which has not yet arrived prominently in Europe, it says basically everyone sort of agrees, but at the end, who's going to pay for that? Is it the workers? Is it the companies hiring them, or the platform using them, or is it the government? if you ask me, it should be a pro rata quota from each of these players. But you understand the complexity of this issue, and also who's going to administer such a fund that gives
Yes.
portability of benefit. What legal entity should it be? Should be a non-profit, in my opinion. But you know, I think this is, yeah.
Sorry, many people are basically scared off by this question. I think we need to ask the question. We need to have the debate, whatever the outcome is. But many people say no, it's going to be too complicated. So I think then they stop there. I think we need to have the discussion. And what you say, Marco, is absolutely right. So we need to have the discussion, even if it's a tricky one. We need to be patient and we need to energize before we have this discussion, because it's going to be a long one. But once we overcome this, I think this can definitely tackle the issues we're facing.
I think there's policies in other areas which are also having an indirect effect on this. So, you know, it may sound trivial, but, you know, never underestimate the power of the commute, or, you know, a bad commute. And I think, for example, bad public transport policy is driving more people to work at home and getting them to quit their jobs, right? You know, a recent study in the US, just looking at some numbers here, 23% of people said they quit their jobs because of a bad commute. You know, 60% said their employer hasn't taken action. So, you know, employers aren't taking action, bad public transport policy, lack of alternatives. So I think if we want people in all different types of work, you know, we need to look at it more holistically and look at other public policies as well.
And when we think of these topics, I think we should also think of the environmental challenges. I mean, we can't continue to produce and consume as we have been doing for the last centuries. So we have to rethink how much time should we actually be working? And therefore, there has to be more redistribution, because we know that there's automation, there's artificial intelligence, but there's especially environmental challenges. If we don't deal with those, well, they're just not going to be humankind as we know it. So we have to think.
Well, yeah. Running out of air and water is definitely a downside of employment. I think that's definitely a thing that needs to be considered in our policy making. No, really, I mean, we're laughing because it's like saying the sky is blue, and yet, you know, the research on climate change just came out this week, and you know, I'm assuming everybody saw that with the 1.5% change. This is a factor that's going to have to come in. Historically, it's been considered a not relevant point, sort of a side point. But there are some points that just keep looming larger and larger, and that's certainly one of them. And they're going to become the central point fairly quickly, don't you think?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a driver for why people are choosing not to commute to work or go into work. But it's also, you know, the flip side of that is the other big elephant in the room that no one's really talking about, and that's spending enough time with your family and being where you want to be as opposed to where you want to commute to. I think that's also going to be a big shift in pushing down rent prices, make sure people can afford life. So the economic side and the family side will be as important as the purely environmental side. From what we've been seeing across the network. Just throwing that out there, that it's also a big part. People are obviously caring about the environment, but they also want to spend more time with their family, and they also want to be able to afford a better quality of life. And that's pushing people out of the centers and into more freelance ad hoc type work.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing that in the Top Town network. You know, we have extremely talented developers in places like Serbia, Bulgaria, you know, a lot of Eastern and Southern Europe, where before, you know, if they wanted to, you know, earn a good living, they'd have to go to some of the big hubs in Europe, or they'd have to go to Silicon Valley to really show off their talents. But now there are more and more options to stay at home and to really earn a good living. And, you know, exactly for the reasons you say, they want to build a house there, they want to keep roots, they want to have children. So I think that's one of the primary drivers of freelancing for sure.
Yeah, and even more and more services are coming to you these days. I mean, forget drones and all those things. But for example, here in Finland, what I see is that you still have the house doctors. They come to you. I mean, they started coming back to you in the last years or so. And I think independent work or working from home, remote working, is one of the driver behind these movements of more and more services coming to you without you needing to commute to places.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think, you know, as I mentioned before, Estonia has 1.3 million people, but has the land area similar to, bigger than Denmark, bigger than the Netherlands. So they've had to develop these kind of services for all of their own citizens, digital services, so that people can stay in their villages and work there and start companies there. And then I think now they've tried to take this expertise and just open it up to the rest of the world. We really see this movement of location independence, people living and being, you know, wanting to live and work where they want to live. And the private sector has several things that have helped spur this. You know, the internet, of course, people being able to work online, work from wherever they want. But you know, when you have the government still wants you to, they want to know where you live. They want to know, you know, you need to live in a certain city to get a certain service or a certain country. So many things are based on residency. So, you know, I think Estonia is, we haven't solved the whole problem yet, but we're starting to tap into this notion of location independence and serving these type of people and many of them freelancers who want to be location independent and live where they and work where they want to be. And I think more and more countries are going to have to adapt to this model. They're going to have to start serving these people, and they're going to have to change the way they tax their citizens. They're going to have to change the way they give them Social Security. And I think, you know, Estonia is kind of at the forefront of this, but it's only a matter of time before other countries have to catch up to what Estonia has been trying to do as far as serving these types of people.
Yeah, how does it, because that's really, I mean, everybody's all excited about the e-residency just because it's cool, right? I mean, it's cool, it's online, it's nifty, but how does it solve the problems? Because you've been at it for several years, so you've got to have some data.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, as I mentioned, it's actually at the core of the program. It's really nothing new. It's just built on top of the existing systems that have been around for Estonian citizens and residents for decades. But you know, in the last 4 years, we've had over 45,000 people apply to become e-residents. And what we're really excited about is they've started over 5,000 companies here in Estonia. So there's two major groups. One are people inside of Europe who want ease of administration, ease of doing business. Maybe they're traveling a lot, and you know, and they're sick of dealing with paperwork and bureaucracy from their home countries or from you know, always traveling. So they decide to set up an entity in Estonia, which is more portable and can work with them. Or we see people from outside of Europe who, for example, in Ukraine. Ukraine is the fastest growing country for e-residency. People setting up companies here, they have lots of business relationships with Europeans, people in the EU. But of course, if you've ever tried to pay, you know, make a transfer between Europe and the EU, and Ukraine, it's a nightmare. So we have lots of talented Ukrainians setting up their companies in Estonia. We have people from India and Turkey, kind of the same profile. But then, of course, we have people from Germany and Italy as well, who face a lot of bureaucracy at home. They want an easier way to do business. Maybe they spend 6 months of the year in Thailand, and you know, they want just a place that tries to move at the speed that they do, and that they expect that the private sector has done, but other governments just haven't caught up yet. So it's like I said, Estonia is not perfect. You know, of course, it's not a tax haven. You know, you still have to live and pay taxes. Pay your social taxes where you create value for your company. But I think we're trying to solve it. We're trying to serve this new group of people. So yes, we have lots of work to do, and we don't want to be competing with other governments, but we just want them to catch up and start thinking like Estonia.
Anybody else got thoughts about the government and freelancers?
I think just to chip in on this, I think there's also very good examples how the private sector can actually cooperate with governments. And speaking of Estonia, we have a tax agreement in place where we basically, because we all know like tax bureaucracy and so forth is quite cumbersome at times, and in the age of digitalization, I think it's not only a threat, but it also is an opportunity to basically improve transparency and also improve the communication between the freelancer or the independent worker and the government. So basically what we have put in place, not only with Estonia, but also now with the Czech Republic, is basically that the driver partner can basically decide whether he would like to have a feature in which he, at the end of the year, can just press a button and then all his economic activities are basically automatically communicated to the Estonian tax authorities in order to facilitate that tax declaration process. Something that I think can be a good model for other countries, and that can actually serve in exploring how we can actually work on a new social security system that can actually be more inclusive for all.
Exactly.
I have a question. So there's one thing that I don't get. So if you're paying taxes in Estonia, you're paying them to the Estonian state. You're not paying them where you're working and living. Or did I get that wrong?
Yeah. So I think we touched on it a few times here, but e-residency in Estonia is not it's not a tax haven. The system is not meant for people to avoid taxes, and in fact, Estonia is a very bad place to do that. Estonia is extremely transparent with its business environment. All taxation for company is public information. You can look up any company, see who the owner is, how much taxes they've paid, etc. So I think, as we were just discussing before, it's actually about ease of doing business. And in Estonia, it shares tax data with other countries. So when you live in one place and you do all of your business there, you do pay your social taxes and your personal taxes there. But of course, your corporate taxes depends on many different factors. Where the value is generated, and we're not. This program isn't meant to make tax money for Estonia. It's meant to bring in more companies to Estonia to work with Estonian citizens and their businesses, give them more customers, improve our digital services that are built for Estonian citizens and make them scale them up so they're better and improving all the time. So it's just about creating a bigger market for the country, I think. So yeah, of course, you still do pay your taxes where you live and generate value.
One piece of advice I always give to freelancers, and definitely while we're waiting for all the gaps to be filled by governments or the private sector, and it's a very simple step, is just to hire a good accountant and/or work law expert. It may seem like a trivial thing, but you'd be surprised at how many freelancers try to do their books and the papers themselves, and how much time that sucks up. Don't do that. Like you may pay, whatever, X euros a month, but it will save you a lot of money in the long run.
Well, I'm going to grab that transition because it's one of the main pain points. Interestingly enough, accounting and taxes, as long as we're talking about paying for the government, one of the main pain points that my coworkers talk about continually when they talk about being a freelancer is exactly that. It is unless they are actually people who do books, keep books, or are themselves accountants. It is either hunting up somebody that you can trust, or it is finding some kind of software that you can use and not making too big a mess of it. That is certainly one of the pain points that came up early when I was setting up a co-working space, and so we started having events in the spaces where our members that were accountants and bookkeepers could come and talk to the other co-workers who were not. And that was really useful. But what other kinds of pain points could be overcome by that kind of collective, collaborative, community kind of an effort? Let's see, Brian. I haven't heard from you in a while. Brian from Cowork.
Yeah, I think I touched off it earlier, but one of the things I've seen with the community efforts is certainty of work. So if you're operating in isolated business relationships, so you might have a number of customers you're working with, and you're doing certain methods to flesh out your customer funnel. The work can be hard sometimes to manage the peaks and troughs of the workflow. If you're part of a group, of a partnership who also has access to other customers who similarly are open to using freelancers, so all of a sudden you open out your potential for work to a wider group. And I think what that gives you, which is maybe a bit different to what some of the freelancing platforms, what they give you is that business relationships are very much built on trust. And although there is, of course, reviews and you can see how others have found people on freelancing platforms, if you are part of a group and they trust you to do a certain piece of work, and they trust you enough to refer you to a customer, I think that's very powerful, and that can be very helpful to you to get work, and it can also be very helpful for customers. So again, I think that collaboration with other peers can be very helpful in just in terms of that pure workflow. I suppose to create that steady workflow.
Janine, we have a question from the audience.
Oh, good.
On YouTube. It's about the system they have in France as well as in other countries, partagé salariat or umbrella companies. So basically having a back office for the self-employed, and this links, I'm jumping in now because this links with accounting and so on. And I think he's asking whether is this a solution worth keeping in consideration, again, for policymaker or the private sector.
I'll jump in. Well, there's something similar, yet very different between the portage salarial and cooperatives like Coopérative d'Activité et d'Emploi in France, or even the SMART model. The similarities is that we make freelancers salaried workers so they access more social protection as salaried workers and taking care of all the administrative burden. The difference is in the governance of the structure and in where the money goes. So portage salarial is business as usual. It's a company that does services, provides good stuff, but then there's a CEO that decides everything and the money is, I don't know, where the benefits go. But in co-ops models, you have a governance that is the members, the users, the freelancers, they are part of the governance. They have a say on where the money goes. And it's not distributed to shareholders who are, I don't know where in the world. It's always re-injected in the community. So I think it's an interesting model. It just depends on what type of business you want to be working in.